An unusually oppressive early morning summer heat shimmered on the pavement as Kalina Greystone took off at a steady jog from the front of her shop, Geeks and Things. She had barely taken enough steps to get to the next block on Main Street when her phone beeped at her, displaying the temperature, 81 degrees, at 7 in the morning. "Wonderful," she groaned, before settling on a playlist and picking up the pace. Heat or no heat, she needed to get her run in before she had to open up for the day. The end of summer was a big moneymaker for the shop, especially with kids getting ready for school. There was little doubt in her mind that most of the teenagers in town would be turning in summer reading lists crammed with comics and graphic novels. She only felt a little guilty that the next generation wasn't reading actual books. The notion that this was her shop, her livelihood, had finally settled in. People in town had stopped comparing the way she ran the business to her father, at least to her face, and it made the decision to come back home to Ellsworth feel like the right call. The little seaside town moved at a slower pace to the city, where she'd spent most of her adult life. But it had some perks, too. She'd managed to reconnect and rekindle a spark with her high school sweetheart, Christian Harper. Kalina took a sharp left and sucked in a deep breath as she took the hill leading in the direction of the cemetery and the town's one church. As her heart pounded in her ears from the exertion, she flashed back to 3 months ago when she and Chris had stood in the cemetery and solved a pair of murders. The frenzy surrounding Aunt Agatha and Ms. Ellicott's passing had finally died down, and the town was back to being quaint and normal. Kalina's phone buzzed in her pocket, and she pulled it out to see a text from Chris, asking her if they were still on for dinner. She smiled and slowed to a walk before responding that they were definitely on for dinner. They were lucky that their first breakup had been amicable. They were on different life tracks, and they had been mature enough to get that. When he held her hand or kissed her goodnight, she still felt like a giddy schoolgirl. Of course, she dated in college and grad school, but being with Chris now was different. They were finally in a place where they could be together as adults and make it work. Phone stowed back in her pocket, Kalina took off at a sprint to make it up and over the hill and settle back into a comfortable pace. As she ran, she spotted Theo Maxwell in his boxers and undershirt scooping up the morning paper. He blushed bright red and waved before darting back inside. She chuckled to herself and took the next right, heading past the church. The door eased open, and a lone figure stepped out, looking subdued and tired. Leslie Mayfair, the former almost Mrs. Cahill. A pang of sadness tightened Kalina's chest as she watched the usually bubbly schoolteacher hunch her shoulders on her way to her car. She hadn't known her fiancé had been killing little old ladies for sending his innocent father to prison. They made eye contact for a brief, uncomfortable moment, and Kalina opened her mouth to say good morning, but held her tongue. Leslie yanked her car door open and climbed into the driver's seat. Kalina waited until the car was out of sight before continuing her morning circuit. Sweat glistened on her bare arms and matted her short auburn curls to her forehead as she veered away from the church and out towards the coast. Only a handful of people lived out by the water these days, thanks to beach erosion. The salty air was a few degrees cooler, and she sucked in a big gulp, trying to shake the unease from seeing Leslie. Kalina put on another burst of speed and took the rolling slope of Oceanfront Lane at a decent clip.